Loki gasped and fell against the broad outside wall of Jane's laboratory, wrapping both arms around his chest this time and grunting out each breath. He squinted his eyes shut and forced himself to keep still, letting the cool midnight wind soothe his fevered face. The spells he had cast around himself and the efforts he had taken to remain unseen during his journey had taken their toll. But he did not care. He had seen it. He had wrapped darkness and shadow around himself like a cloak, and veiled his form from the sight of all the mortals. When the black sedan had come for Eric in the darkest part of the night, Loki had followed, sweeping out of the laboratory and soundlessly landing atop the vehicle. He had stood balanced atop it as it drove, like a raven on a fence, his cape billowing out behind him. It had been a long journey, several hours, and he had the sense they had been traveling west. Loki had allowed his invisibility to drop briefly during this leg of the journey, for no other vehicles or mortals were anywhere nearby. Ordinarily, he would not have allowed himself such vulnerability, but maintaining that shield drained him, and he would need it later. When they had finally arrived at a stone bunker sunk half into the ground, lit by the headlights and lamps atop a wire fence, Loki had vanished himself and followed on Eric's heels like a phantom, every step in sync with the scientists. They whispered down hallways, Eric heeding the directions of the tall, strapping guards, Loki ignoring his pain and memorizing every detail of their passage. When they had come to the last corner and turned into a dark, tall-ceilinged hallway, lined with boxes and cases, Loki had slowed down and altered his very form, so he could slide through cabinets and between hairline cracks. He stayed beside Eric and gazed sideways at him as Eric greeted a formidable, dark-skinned stranger in a suit, bearing only one eye. "So you're the man behind all this," Eric said as he walked in, obviously trying to hide his nervousness. "It's quite a labyrinth." "I was thinking, they're taking me down here to kill me," Eric laughed. The other man said nothing. Loki's eyes narrowed as Eric's mirth vanished, and he swallowed, slowing to a halt. "I've been hearing about the New Mexico situation," the other man said, his voice deep and crisp. "Your work has impressed a lot of people, much smarter than I am." "I have a lot to work with," Eric confessed. "The Foster theory, a gateway to another dimension. It's unprecedented." The other man lifted his chin. Loki sensed Eric's doubt ripple out from him. "Isn't it?" The scientist frowned. The other man turned, hands in pockets, and strode toward a small stand on which sat a rectangular silver box. "Legend tells us one thing, history another," the man said, coming around behind the box. "But every now and then, we find something that belongs to both." He unlatched the box. It hissed. He lifted the lid. A blue glow shot out from beneath the lid, dazzling Loki's eyes. And the black, sparkling tendrils around him and inside him flashed. Then, as his eyes locked on that glow, the wisps of magic danced like fireworks, setting his pulse pounding, shooting thrills and sparks down to his fingertips. And the next moment, the tendrils pulled his heart toward that sapphire light like an iron chain. All Loki's breath locked in his lungs, and he stared, transfixed, at a small, glowing cube that would fit snugly in the palm of his hand, should he choose to reach out and take it. But he was frozen. It was so old, so fantastically rich and simple and vast. He had never felt such raw power. It shook him down to his foundations, kept him rigid and breathless, and in the same moment he was possessed by a mindless, racing terror. Terror of a crouching, sharp-fanged beast restrained by a piece of thread. "What is it?" Eric murmured. "Power, Doctor," the other man said, watching him. "If we can figure out how to tap it, maybe unlimited power." Again, Loki sensed Eric's doubt, his uncertainty, and it hit Loki like a slap. His eyes flashed, and his throat latched shut as he wrenched his gaze from the box and stared at Eric. Loki was not sure what this blue box was, or what it did. He could not even decipher his whirling emotions yet, to decide whether or not he hated the thing, or could not live without it. All he knew was that those were suddenly his only choices: hatred or desperate need. And at the moment, in Loki's state of weakness, Eric was his only link to it. Loki took a breath and whirled the ebony and twinkling shroud around him once more. He turned his head and whispered coaxingly, just to Eric. And when he did, he saw the scientist tilt toward him. "Well," Loki breathed, watching him, "I guess that's worth a look." The indecision faded from Eric's face, and he lifted his eyes to the other man. "Well, I guess that's worth a look." He smiled. Now, in the silence of the desert, Loki sat down to sink on the ground and lean back against the cool wall, unveiling his presence and returning to his usual state, and trying to keep from losing consciousness. He felt dirty and clammy and tired beyond reasoning, and the mending he had done to his broken bone had nearly come apart. But the presence of that blue box now sat heavy in his heart, like a stone at the bottom of a glass of water. He could feel it pulsing across the distance, calling his name, and 3 tendrils of magic, each no wider than one of his fingers, had strung themselves between him and it, and its energy played upon them, softly, like silver strings of a harp in another room. Loki opened his eyes. The dawn pressed against the horizon, and he had to tilt his head. But if he looked straight up, he could still glimpse the stars amidst a field of velvet blue, and the unsettling strum of that harp joined the throb of black poison through his limbs.